The monster behind the smile. Picture this: a man who once promised freedom, standing over a nation drowning in blood. Idi Amin didn't just rule Uganda, he terrorized it. And while the world knows about his reign of horror, there's one story that's been buried in silence: what happened to his own children when everything collapsed. If this shocks you, you need to subscribe to Timeless Words right now. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we're diving into the darkest corners of history that most channels won't touch. The truth doesn't care about your comfort zone. The making of a tyrant. Born around 1925 in Kiboko, a forgotten corner of northwestern Uganda, Amin's story begins in absolute poverty. No birth certificate. No education past 4th grade. He couldn't even read or write properly. But what he lacked in learning, he made up for in raw, terrifying power. Standing over 6 feet 4 inches, Amin was a physical force of nature. In 1946, he joined the King's African Rifles, the British colonial army. This wasn't just a job, it was his escape from nothing into something. And that something turned dark fast. During the Momo Rebellion in Kenya during the 1950s, Amin showed the world who he really was. Witnesses reported executions so brutal they're hard to speak about. Beheadings, bodies used as warnings. The British knew exactly what kind of monster they were creating, but they didn't care. He was useful for crushing resistance. And that's all that mattered. The climb to power. By 1959, Amin reached sergeant rank, impressive for an African soldier in a colonial army designed to keep Africans down. When Uganda gained independence in 1962, Milton Obote saw Amin's potential. He promoted him rapidly until Amin commanded the entire army. At first, Amin played the loyal enforcer. Opposition groups, crushed political enemies, silenced. But behind those obedient eyes, Amin was building his own empire within the military. He surrounded himself with soldiers from his Kakwa ethnic group and other northern tribes. These men weren't just loyal, they were devoted. The breaking point came in 1966 when Obote ordered Amin to attack the Buganda kingdom's palace. Soldiers stormed in, killing civilians, looting everything in sight. The king barely escaped with his life, fleeing to London. This brutal display made Amin a hero to some and a devil to others. But Amin wasn't satisfied being number 2. As Obote grew suspicious and tried to limit his power, it was already too late. On January 25, 1971, while Obote attended a Commonwealth meeting in Singapore, Amin struck. Tanks rolled through Kampala. Radio stations went silent, then blared new messages. The coup was swift, calculated, and unstoppable. The nightmare begins. Crowds initially celebrated in the streets. Some were just happy Obote was gone. Others believed Amin's promises of peace and unity. They had no idea they'd just welcomed one of Africa's most brutal dictators into absolute power. Within weeks, the killings started. Soldiers and officials loyal to Obote were arrested without trial. Some vanished into cells and never emerged. Others were executed publicly as warnings. In that first year alone, an estimated 10,000 people died, strangled, shot, beaten to death. Reports suggest Amin sometimes watched these executions personally, feeding off the fear. Amin crowned himself president for life and adopted bizarre titles like Lord of All, the Beasts of the Earth, and Fishes of the Sea. But behind the absurd names was a killing machine. His State Research Bureau and Public Safety Unit became death squads, hunting anyone suspected of disloyalty. Rivers of blood. Between 1972 and 1973, Amin ordered mass killings of the Akoli and Lengo peoples. Soldiers invaded villages, dragging entire families from their homes. Men, women, children, nobody was spared. Some were shot immediately. Others were taken to military barracks for torture before execution. The Nile River became a graveyard. Fishermen stopped fishing because they kept pulling up human remains instead of fish. The riverbanks reeked with decomposing corpses. This wasn't warmth, this was systematic extermination. Chief Justice Benedict Kiwanuka, Uganda's first African Chief Justice, was kidnapped in broad daylight in 1972. His crime: questioning Amin's actions. He was tortured and murdered. If even the highest judge in the land could disappear, nobody was safe. Economic devastation. In August 1972, Amin dropped a bomb on Uganda's economy. He gave the Asian community nearly 60,000 people 90 days to leave the country. These weren't newcomers. Many families had been in Uganda for 3 or 4 generations, building businesses, running farms, managing the backbone of the economy. Amin accused them of sabotaging Uganda and exploiting Africans. He painted himself as a champion of the poor, reclaiming wealth for native Uganda. The truth: he was destroying his own country. Shops that supplied everything from soap to clothing shut down overnight. Factories producing sugar, textiles, and steel went dark. Productive farms were handed to Amin's military friends, who knew nothing about agriculture. Crops rotted in fields. Basic goods vanished from markets. Uganda, once called the Pearl of Africa, with one of the strongest economies in the region, collapsed at breathtaking speed. Inflation exploded. Families couldn't afford bread or salt. Hospitals ran out of medicine. The country descended into poverty and starvation, while Amin lived in palaces filled with imported champagne and luxury cars. The family behind the monster meme married at least 5 women and fathered over 40 children. To the world, he presented himself as a family man. Behind closed doors, chaos and terror. In 1974, his third wife, Idi Amin, died under suspicious circumstances. Officials claimed it was an accident, but her body was found in a morgue, badly mutilated with parts missing. Many believed Amin ordered her murder after suspecting infidelity. Doctors who handled the case soon disappeared. Other wives spoke quietly of beatings and constant fear. Amin treated women as possessions. Young women who refused his advances could be kidnapped, threatened, or killed. Even his own children weren't safe from his paranoia. Intelligence reports suggested Amin practiced cannibalism, eating the flesh of enemies because he believed it would give him their strength. Some dismissed these as rumors. Others who served close to him swore they witnessed rituals too horrifying to deny. Silencing the educated. By the mid-1970s, Amin's terror expanded into schools, universities, and churches. Teachers, professors, doctors, and students disappeared in the middle of the night. The educated class threatened Amin because they could think, question, and inspire resistance. Universities went silent. Lecturers who spoke freely vanished. Students who protested were beaten, jailed, or executed. Uganda's brightest minds fled the country, leaving behind empty libraries and abandoned research. The murder that shocked the world. In February 1977, Amin crossed a line that finally awakened global outrage. Archbishop Janani Luwum, a respected church leader known across Africa, was arrested along with 2 cabinet ministers. The government claimed they were plotting against the state and that Luwum died in a car crash while trying to escape. The truth? Luwum was taken to a secret location, severely beaten, and shot. His body, discovered with bullet wounds, told the real story. The killing of such a prominent Christian leader sent shockwaves around the world. Churches across Europe and America demanded justice. Britain, which had once supported Amin, could no longer stay silent. Inside Uganda, priests went into hiding. Sermons were censored. People stopped speaking about politics, even with close friends. Words themselves became dangerous. By 1977, the death toll exceeded 200,000. Bodies filled rivers, fields, and shallow graves. Families couldn't even mourn openly because grieving raised suspicion. The fall. By 1978, Amin's regime was collapsing. His economy was destroyed. His soldiers were demoralized. Instead of fixing problems at home, he made a fatal mistake. He invaded Tanzania. Tanzania's president, Julius Nyerere, struck back hard. His army, joined by thousands of Ugandan exiles hungry for revenge, launched a devastating counterattack. Amin's weak, corrupt military crumbled. Soldiers deserted. Some switched sides. In April 1979, Tanzanian forces stormed Kampala. Amin's soldiers fled in chaos. The dictator himself escaped before the city fell. First to Libya, then to Saudi Arabia. There, the man who murdered an estimated 300,000 people lived comfortably in exile, never facing trial, never answering for his crimes. He died in 2003 in a Saudi hospital, escaping justice until his final breath. The children left behind, but here's the question nobody asks. What happened to Amin's children after his fall? With over 40 children scattered across his 5 marriages and countless affairs, their fates were as varied as they were tragic. Some fled with Amin to exile. They grew up in Libya and Saudi Arabia, living in relative comfort but carrying the weight of their father's legacy. These children received education and financial support, insulated from the horror their father created. Others weren't so fortunate. Children left behind in Uganda faced a different reality. Some were hunted by revenge-seeking citizens who couldn't distinguish between the monster and his offspring. Several changed their names, trying to erase their connection to Amin. They lived in hiding, constantly looking over their shoulders. One of Amin's sons, Tabon Amin, became a deputy leader of an insurgent group in northern Uganda during the 1990s. He followed in his father's violent footsteps before being killed in a military operation. Another son, Lumumba Amin, tried to live quietly but struggled with the stigma attached to his name. Amin's daughter, Idi Amin, has spoken publicly about the psychological trauma of being associated with such brutality. She's worked to distance herself from her father's legacy while acknowledging she can never fully escape it. Several children have lived in obscurity, deliberately staying out of public view. Some faced discrimination and struggled to find work because employers feared hiring anyone connected to Amin. Others moved to different countries, starting over with new identities. The children who remained in Saudi Arabia with Amin during his exile witnessed a different kind of tragedy, watching their father live comfortably, while Uganda continued to suffer from his actions. Some reports suggest Amin showed little remorse, even bragging about his time in power. The lasting impact today, Amin's children are scattered across the globe. Some have achieved success despite their surname. Others have disappeared into anonymity, but all of them carry the burden of being related to one of history's most brutal dictators. The question isn't just what happened to the Mits, whether they bear responsibility for their father's crimes. Most were innocent children when these atrocities occurred. Yet the shadow of Amin's legacy follows them everywhere. Uganda itself is still healing. Mass graves continue to be discovered. Families still search for loved ones who vanished decades ago. The psychological scars run deep in a nation that watched neighbors turn on neighbors, where trust was destroyed and fear became the currency of survival. The truth, we can't ignore Idi Amin's story, isn't just about one man's cruelty. It's about how the world watched, how powerful nations supported him when it was convenient, and how justice failed when it mattered most. His children, whether complicit or innocent, became living reminders of what happens when evil goes unchecked. This is why Timeless Words exists, to tell the stories that make you uncomfortable, the truths that history tries to bury. If this opened your eyes, subscribe now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us what shocked you most. We're just getting started, and the next story will be even more intense.